Welcome to episode number 8 of Winning Hand, the podcast about Marvel Champions, one card at a time. I am your host, Boom Guy, and as always, I am joined by the Merry and Pippin to my Gandalf, LazyTitan and Kaeko.
How's it going? I'm definitely Pippin.
Love Star Trek, by the way.
Yeah, you big Star Trek fan?
Yeah, those are my favorite characters.
Well, we are back again for episode number 8 today. Thank you to everyone who's been listening and commenting and subscribing and liking and loving and whatever. Let's get right into it. Today we are talking about one of my favorite heroes in the entire game. And I know that you both like him too as well.
Absolutely.
Rocket Raccoon, the hero. He's amazing. I love him and I can't wait to talk about him. I just also watched the Guardians movie. Have you guys seen the Guardians movie? Guardians 3?
Guardians 3, one of the best MCU movies just in general.
Yeah.
Excellent if you haven't seen it.
So good. So good. Love Rocket. Love the whole Guardians movie. Love that it was all about Rocket. We've talked before, and I don't read comics. I don't think either of you really do either. So I don't know much about Rocket. I don't know much about the Guardians except for the MCU. And I really feel like either the MCU is very loyal to the comics or the card game is kind of pulling from the MCU. And I think there's some teasers and links to the MCU throughout other cards, but I really feel like this is Rocket from the movies.
I definitely think they're pulling from the MCU.
I think so too. There is an artist credit on there, so I do think that they're kind of pulling that from it as inspiration so that they can kind of get that familiarity with the crowd.
Before we get to Rocket, as excited as we all are to talk about him, let's talk about what we've been playing lately. LazyTitan, why don't you kick us off?
So in the last episode, I had an epiphany about building a Spider-Woman deck with green and red, trying to use pin down and bring it to maximize the amount of minions I can hold and draw cards with. The final draft of the deck that I ended up playing is what's in the credit for the episode, so if you want to play the same deck I did and live the dream, you can go back there. But I played this deck, and it was pretty good. I played it with Boom Guy. We played together. Mm-hmm. And in the 2 games that we played, he was playing Hulk, and then he was playing Groot, and we didn't lose. So I think that's a pretty good testament to the power of this deck. It wasn't the greatest deck I've ever built, but it managed to keep up. The pin down on the minions was good. We were playing Zola, so that also was hurting it because I was putting pin down on things that would then get buffed by quite a bit, and then it was kind of hard to keep them around. But I think if you weren't playing Zola and had maybe a useful teammate, not Hulk, it would be quite an excellent deck. And I quite like Spider-Woman, actually. Her deck building restriction is interesting, but can actually lead to some fun combinations.
I think Spider-Woman is good for building kind of weird decks and combos that you can't build in other places. Just the fact that you can add 2 different aspects is really cool. I don't know. When I play Spider-Woman, I never have a great time. I don't know why that is. I'm just never super excited to play Spider-Woman, but I recognize that she's insane just because she can borrow from 2 different aspects, which is a crazy ability.
Very good.
And I did watch that deck in person. It's kind of a middle-of-the-road power deck, but I like building decks around just weird single-card combos like that, and sometimes they don't work out, and sometimes they do. But yeah, I did play Hulk in the first game, and I played Groot in the second game, which are rough teammates a lot of times.
And Hulk did do better, I will say.
Yeah, that Hulk deck I built wasn't terrible, actually.
For a Hulk deck, it was pretty solid.
Yeah, it's still Hulk at the end of the day.
And that's what makes him great, is what you're saying.
You always know when you're playing Hulk. Yeah. I thought you were the spider guy, Kaeko. Now you're just on this Hulk thing.
But I gotta stick up for my boy Hulk too. He's getting bullied in the schoolyard. So
you came in episode 1 and you were like, "Oh, I'm the spider guy. I love spiders." Blah blah blah. And now every single episode since then, I think you try to give Hulk some love. Stop trying to make Hulk a thing.
If you throw on symbiote suit onto Hulk, he can join that spider army. He can join the Web Warriors.
Stop trying to make Hulk a thing. It's not a thing.
Even symbiote suit can't fix Hulk.
Next episode, by the way.
That's not the next episode. That will never be the next episode. We want to have people listen, not unsubscribe. Kaeko, why don't you go next? What have you been playing lately?
All right, so on the topic of Webhead, I've been going back to the roots, and I've been doing Spider-Man, Peter Parker, the main boy, the
Peter
one
Parker.
that all the inheritors are afraid of. Even though he doesn't have organic webbing or claws or venom blasts, he's just
Or crucially, the Web Warrior keyword.
I know that one's his
So the
allies.
inheritors
his
actually
ally
don't even
cards
care
do.
about him.
That's true.
Yeah.
But no, I've just been trying to play around with him. You guys mentioned before that protection is probably his best aspect to play in, so I'm just kind of playing around with that, going off of pin down as we reviewed before, just to kind of hold off on some minions. One thing I forget with every single time is to draw a card when a villain engages an attack, and I do the same thing with
activates.
Wolverine. Activates, that's what I meant. And I do the same thing with Wolverine too, where he heals at the start of every turn. I don't know why I forget those responses.
The drawing card is so key because it's before, which makes protection even better.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I also find that I like playing him in aggression because those wild resources help with my personal favorite hone technique.
Yeah, because his web shooters have those. I think protection is probably my favorite way to play him. I don't play a ton of Peter Parker anymore, but this is a callback, of course, to our very first episode of our podcast where we talked about one of his cards, Swinging Web Kick. So if you haven't listened, go check that out. Peter Parker's solid. I think aggression works for him. I think protection is his best and my favorite to play him in.
I agree. And again, going off of Swing Web Kick, you spend your turns protecting everyone else, supporting yourself, whatever you need to. Resource generators, and then Swinging Web Kick pretty much takes care of those aggressive assaults.
And his alter ego resource is actually quite useful just for setting up. It's actually pretty nice.
Yeah, it is. He doesn't flip down a ton, but when he does, he has Aunt May, and he has
healed fully.
His resource. Yeah, Aunt May's crazy good.
So good. One of the best.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best alter ego supports. I'd go there. So I have been playing a lot of different stuff. As we talked about a minute ago, I've been playing Groot and Hulk, but Hulk was really just kind of a joke deck I built. For the most part, I've been playing a ton of Guardians recently. Ever since I saw the movie, I've been back on a Guardians kick. I've been playing a lot of Star-Lord. I've been playing a bunch of Groot. I've been playing Rocket. I really like the Guardians. I think they're fun to play, maybe about half of them. I do think it's the weakest cycle. They need some more cards to flesh out the archetype, I think. Star-Lord's cool because he makes everyone a Guardian, but there aren't a ton of cards that care about you being a Guardian, and I wish there was more. I think the Guardians need a little bit more help. I wish they had a Quinn Carrier / X-Jet like some of the other cycles do, or Champion's Mobile Bunker, or some other support cards that were really powerful. Nowhere and CITT are good, but not amazing, and they just lack that kind of resource generator, and a lot of the heroes I feel like don't have those resource generators. I mean, Venom can hurt himself to generate a resource. Gamora can generate one for an event.
That's kind of it.
Nebula has her ship, I think.
Oh yeah,
but Rocket doesn't have a resource generator. Groot doesn't have a resource generator, and
Drax doesn't have any.
No, although Drax draws cards when he gets attacked, so that helps.
Yeah, he draws cards when he gets attacked and when he attacks.
I just feel like the Guardians as a whole aren't super strong, and I can't imagine we're going to get more Guardians in this game. I would be pretty surprised if we got other Guardians at this point, but it'd be cool. I'd be down to have like a Mantis pack or some other Guardians.
Yondu, maybe?
Yondu, yeah, another good shout. Cosmo, I'd be down. At the end of the day, I don't think we're going to get any more, so I'm just trying to enjoy the ones that we have. I hope they give us more cards that can work in their decks and flesh them out a little bit, but the Guardians movie definitely has me on a huge Guardians kick right now. But crucially, not the campaign, because a bunch of those scenarios are just nonsense.
Yeah, that campaign isn't good.
Yeah, it's really just not that good.
It's pretty bad. Most of the scenarios aren't very fun, and the Milano mechanic is not super great. I don't know.
What kind of scenarios are there? Because clearly I've played all of them, but
honestly,
just as a refresher.
I mean, I think Drang is fine, and I think Ronan is fine.
Yeah, but
I think
Ronan's like a boss fight.
Yeah, Nebula is not fun, and I don't want to play Nebula anymore, and I don't want to play the Collector either.
Is awful. Collector 1 is terrible. Collector 2, I don't remember being the worst, but it was like fine. Collector 1 is genuinely like the least fun you can have playing this game. If you play
Collector
Hulk
1
and the Collector, that's like maximum not fun.
Is Collector 1 the one where he takes all your
It's the one
cards
where he takes
away,
all the cards, not just
puts
your,
them in the collection?
Too. It's terrible. It's the
That
worst.
is a nonsense mechanic, and
it's a stupid,
not fun
it's
at
so
all.
Bad. No, it's terrible. And I can imagine, because it's discarded from play, if a bunch of the new encounter sets that have like attachments or anything would just make it so much worse. It's just so bad.
And I will say, I mean, I don't know. I don't know who play tested that. There's some scenarios like I've talked about before. I think we talked in the Con of Heroes episode about Sandman. I've played Sandman a lot of times now, and it's just kind of slowly wearing thin for me, his mechanic. But like the Guardian stuff, the Galaxy's Most Wanted cycle, a lot of that wasn't fun the first time I played it. I don't know who
we
play
played the
tested this
collector
and
once.
thought, oh, this is good. Like, this is fun. Like, I'll sell this box, because the very first time I played it and every subsequent time, it's just not fun.
I like Ronin because I like to do a little bit of higher power sometimes.
Sure.
It's like I said, it's like a boss fight. You just set up Ronin and see who can not die. But it's not, it's almost as its own scenario. It's kind of weak, it feels like.
But it's not really fair. Like, it can be fun to set something up and try to beat Ronin. It's like a challenge.
But he's not like a balanced scenario. He's insanely difficult. Like, if you're not building for Ronin, you can't beat Ronin, especially if you go any higher than standard. If you go expert or standard 2 or expert 2, it's just like you just spend a day killing Ronin. He's
from
impossible.
turn 1. He just hits so hard.
He hits you for 8 or more every turn. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's fun, but not in like this is a balanced, fun scenario. It's like a boss fight. It's like an achievement to beat Ronin, just because he's ridiculous. He's like Thanos but scarier. He's so bad.
And then Nebula is like, you think everything is fine, and then you draw one card, and everything fills up with threat, and you lose the game.
Because everything in the entire box adds an ungodly amount of threat every turn. Like Nebula has these counters she puts on this scenario, on her scheme, and you add 2 per counter, and the only way to remove the counter is to exhaust the Milano, which means you can only do it once a turn, and then you have to pay like 2 resources. And so if you ever get more than 1 on there, which it puts 1 on there every turn, if you ever get more than 1, you just kind of lose, because she adds like 8 threat a turn or 10 threat a turn or something, and it doesn't go that high. You just can't beat it.
Yeah.
So then you have to spend resources every turn, which means you're like paying all this stuff, but then if you get an unlucky card, you just lose.
Yeah, we're getting way off track here. So my last thought kind of on the Guardian stuff is the Milano ship command encounter set that goes through the whole campaign. I don't love, and I really just wish the Milano was a support card that could be put into a deck. Whether it was, it should obviously be Guardian, traded and locked, but, it could be a gray card like Quinn Carrier and X-Jet, or it could be, they could have different versions of it for the different aspects. I don't know. I just wish it wasn't a scenario encounter set that had to go through the whole campaign. And I just want to put it in decks because it would be really helpful, I think, and thematic.
Yeah. The Guardians box is terrible, and a lot of those scenarios aren't fun playing. However, for those heroes out there that bought the Guardians box, you will have found yourself in possession of one of the best heroes in the game, and the topic of today's episode, Rocket Raccoon.
That was a great segue.
I know,
was so good.
It was excellent.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we've now segued back into the podcast. We have landed this ship, this Milano, if you will. We've landed it safely back where we needed to be, and we're here to talk about Rocket Raccoon. To start with, Kaeko, do you want to just read the card just so everyone who's listening is familiar with what we're talking about?
Let's do it. All right, I'm going to start on the hero side. So Rocket Raccoon, he's got values of 2 thwart, 1 attack, 1 defense. He's traded Guardian, just Guardian. And his ability is Murdered You. His response, after you deal excess damage to an enemy, draw 1 card. And hand size of 5. He's got 9 health. And his flavor text, that's it. You can attack me. You can call me names, but no one touches my blaster. I'd attempt to do the accent, but I just would not be good at it, so.
Just reading it, I can hear Bradley Cooper, right?
Yeah, it's
I just hear it in his voice.
Yeah.
It's so good. Iconic voice, but keep going.
All right, and then on his alter ego, of course, still Rocket Raccoon. He's got a recovery of 3. His traits are Genius and Outlaw. And his ability is called Tinkering, Action. Choose and discard a tech upgrade you control. Draw 2 cards. Limit once per round. And again, his flavor text, ain't nothing like me, 'cept me.
Ain't nothing like me, except me.
Yep. And then his
So
hand
good.
size goes up to 6.
Who would have thought when Iron Man came out in 2008 or whenever it came out, 2005, that we would all be sitting here having fond memories about a CGI raccoon with Bradley Cooper's voice? What
Yeah.
a beautiful thing.
It's so good. Yeah, I can't unhear that voice every time I read the flavor text. All I can hear is Bradley Cooper's voice, which is
The
great.
MCU has basically just defined what these characters are at this point.
Yeah,
And
for sure. Especially
Yep.
the lesser known characters,
Yeah,
yes,
like
yeah,
Star
'cause
Lord, Gamora.
nobody knew the Guardians before
Yeah, nobody
knew
Guardians
Guardians.
1 came out.
And even like Iron Man, like we talked about in the Iron Man episode, Iron Man looks like Robert Downey Jr. in his card. That's just what Iron Man looks like now.
Mm-hmm. He's just Robert Downey Jr. now.
He's just Robert Downey Jr. now. And Captain America kind of always looked like Chris Evans, but now he just looked more like him. Like these are just who these people are now.
Yeah. So Rocket Raccoon. Let's start with his alter ego side, because I think we're going to talk a lot about his hero side. So I want to kind of start with the alter ego, which I think has a lot going for it. So the first thing is that ability, tinkering. You choose and discard a tech upgrade you control and draw 2 cards. That is a very good ability.
Yeah.
Yes.
Obviously, he has a lot of tech in his kit. There's a lot of other cards that are tech throughout the game, and being able to draw 2 cards is really good. Crucially, it also doesn't have to be an upgrade like his weapons or pulse grenade or whatever. It can also be energy spear that you've attached to a guardian.
Energy
or
barrier.
energy barrier if you're playing protection. But my point was that you can discard the cards that you have attached to your allies. So if you're playing, like we talked before, the Guardians of the Galaxy card, the leadership card, draws a card when you play an upgrade onto an ally. So you draw a card for that to replace the card you played. If you flip down, you can discard that card to draw 2 cards. There's just a lot you can do with it. It is limited to once per round, which is fair, because otherwise you could get pretty crazy with it. And we're going to talk about limiting abilities in a minute, because I think most abilities I can think of in the game are limited. I think often the designers of the game have kind of kept the handbrake on, so you can't go wild. You can't discard every tech upgrade you control to draw 1,000,000 cards. You can discard 1 to draw 2.
Which I think is good. I'm generally in favor of limiting an ability rather than leaving it unlimited. But as far as Rocket goes, of his 2 abilities, it feels like this one would have been the one to leave unlimited.
Yeah.
But
We're
get to
teasing
that.
about what's going to happen. But yes, I think this ability could have been unlimited, but I appreciate that they are pretty consistent throughout the game, with some exceptions, about limiting abilities so you can't build decks that go wild. Now, the art on this side, I think is really great. I really like the art, the way he's drawn, what he's like tinkering with some kind of a weapon. Looks
Just
like he's got a
fixing up a gun.
screwdriver.
Oh, it's the same gun.
It is. Looks like it could be the same gun.
Yeah, it could be the same
that's on
gun.
the hero side. But the art's great. He has kind of a brown and light brown, I guess, color scheme with a little red stripe. You know, all the heroes have a color scheme. That's his. And then he has the little face is kind of weird in the corner. I don't love that. I'll be honest.
I like it. I like it. It's like that weird orange color underneath it, but I like his little face. I think that's a good one. He looks rabid. He looks insane, but I do think he looks like he's like I touched his blaster and he's not happy about it.
As far as that little head in the corner, I feel like it's awkward that his mouth is open, but I think what happened is they maybe drew it closed at first, realized it's too small to see that it doesn't look like he has a mouth. Let's make an open mouth.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. That's what probably I would run into if I was doing these arts. But I will say shout out to Andrea DeVito and Laura Villari. Apologize if I mispronounced those, but yes, we do finally have artist credit.
Yeah.
And those are the 2 that worked on the hero and the alter ego arts.
Yeah, and this is art that was made for the game. I checked the community list. There's no comic book listed, so I think this is was commissioned for the game. It looks really good. I like it. I like his outfit. I like his pose. I like that his ear kind of goes over his name banner at the top.
I love all the line strokes and the details in the fur. I love the color scheme, the brown, the white, the black, and they all kind of blend into each other. You know, there's no hard stops between those colors.
Yeah.
And even in the weapons and just the minor details, like this is incredibly detailed.
Yeah.
Everything.
I wish there was a full art version of Rocket, because he's really cool.
One thing I will say, I do like how in his alter ego side he's got regular eyes, but on his hero side he's got like these rabid red eyes.
When he's angry. It looks like he's wearing the same outfit on both sides too. Let's talk about the theme of the alter ego side.
Of just the alter ego side?
Yeah,
I mean,
just well, we're gonna get to hero in a minute. I think we're gonna spend the bulk of our time
okay.
talking about the
Got
hero
it, got
side.
it. No, I do like his tinkering action. It really feels like he's salvaging. He's taking stuff apart to work on something else or to improve something else. So the fact that you discard a tech upgrade and then you draw 2 cards and you basically get to form your turn around that, it really does feel like Rocket, just on that alter ego side, like you said.
Yeah.
And also just his traits, Genius and Outlaw, compared to on his hero side, Guardian, that also kind of feels accurate because it's obviously on his hero side, he's a Guardian of the Galaxy. That's what he stands for. But, let's say outside of that, yeah, he's a genius. He's tinkering, like his ability says. He's an outlaw, which we all know based on the MCU, that's what his background was. So
No, I think this fits the theme a lot. I mean, I just watched Guardians 3, obviously. I recently rewatched Guardians 1, and he's constantly tinkering with random stuff that he finds and building something and putting something together. So I think it fits the theme. It's cool that you have a tech upgrade. He's the second hero, I think, that cares about tech after Iron Man. And the fact that you can discard them to draw stuff, it's a cool mechanic, and I think it works well.
Even within his own kit, his tech upgrades, unlike most tech upgrades that go away when they lose counters, his don't specifically, so that you can keep them around so that you can burn them to his tinkering ability, which then works into his abilities even more. Because his abilities his upgrades don't go away. So
Most upgrades in the game, like you said, or supports, when you play them down, they come in with counters. When the counters are exhausted, they're gone. The card goes away. It gets discarded. Crucially, Rockets do not. So if he uses any of them, you use all of its counters, it stays there until you either choose to discard it or he has cards to reload those upgrades, right? And he can put counters back on them. I think he's the only one that can do that.
Because they aren't use counters. Everything else is they're called uses, charge counters, uses, command counters, whatever they are. But Rocket, they're just charge counters, which means that they're not tied to the counters. They're just cards that have counters on them, and then he has things that can upgrade them, which is very interesting and does come into play sometimes.
Yes, it does. So that's cool. So it allows you to take advantage of this ability more. So if you can flip down, if something is exhausted, you can pitch it to draw some cards. Now let's talk about the hero side. This is what the people came for.
This is
what
my
the people
favorite
want.
part.
The hero side is insane. He's a 2 thwart, 1 attack, 1 defense, which is
Pretty
an
bad.
okay stat line. It's okay. He has 2 thwart.
4? That's pretty bad.
That's true. 4 is low. A lot of them have closer to 6. But he has upgrades. He has 1 for his thwart and 1 for his attack, which it gets him up to that magic number of 6. When we're talking about 6, we mean if you add the thwart, the attack, and the defense together, most heroes are around 6. They don't go over 6. Very few of them go over that.
None
or have
of
the
them go
ability to
over.
go over. Well, Ironheart can go over.
Oh, yeah, once you get her to a full. Then she's 8, maybe?
Yeah, 3, 2, 3 or something. So there are a few, but it's very, very limited. Many of them are around that 6. So 2 thwart, 1 attack, 1 defense. He can get up to 3 thwart, which is really good. I feel like Phoenix has 3 thwart. I feel like Rocket could have 3. If he's a
yeah, I
genius.
feel like he should have 3.
He could be a 3/1/1, I feel like.
He could be a 3/1/1, definitely.
And then his boots wouldn't give him +1 thwart.
Yeah, he couldn't go to 4. That's crazy.
Right,
But
right.
his boots gave him defense.
He does need defense, and that he only has 9 hit points. And I think that's one of the things right away you got to talk about, right? He is a little squishy.
He's
and that's
very
his big
squishy.
weakness. 9 hit points does not feel like a lot.
And he also doesn't have any allies or any defense abilities. He has 0 defense cards. He has 1 defense. He has no way to increase his defense, and he has no allies.
Wow.
So a lot of other 9 hit point heroes can do stuff like that. Like Quicksilver is good at defending, and
Or
he also
Hawkeye.
has a defense. Yeah, Hawkeye has Mockingbird, but Rocket has 0 built-in ways to keep himself alive, except for 1 card that heals him, which is not. That's more healing yourself after the fact. You can't defend yourself when it's coming in, so you can very much struggle with enemies that attack a lot or fast, like Ronin. We talked about earlier. Not a good one to play against Ronin, unless you have a defender.
He can struggle. He's a little soft, and he does not have any signature ally. There's actually a number of Guardians that don't have a signature ally.
I think most of them don't.
I
No,
think
Nebula and Gamora do,
Nebula and Gamora both
And so
do.
Star-Lord.
Star-Lord does.
but none of the
it's
rest of
just,
them do. Oh no, so does Adam Warlock. Half
Adam
of them
Warlock.
do.
Half of them do. So it's just Rocket, Groot, and
Drax and Venom.
No, Drax is Mantis.
Oh, Mantis. Oh, he does too. So it's more than them. It's just
So there's
Rocket.
just 3. This is
Really?
Venom, Rocket, and Groot that don't have signature allies. There are a group of gray Guardian allies, right? So you could include Groot or Gamora and Drax, etc., because he does need some.
He does very much need some defense.
One defense, we talked about before. One defense just feels bad, and
You just don't really ever use it unless it's
you
going
don't
to
want
save you.
Yeah, unless you're like might die, and then you have to save that one hit point. But for the most part, you don't want to do that.
But our boy makes up for this lack of defense with
Oh boy,
the most incredibly overpowered amount of offense you can possibly imagine.
yeah.
For those who haven't played Rocket Raccoon,
Mm-hmm.
his ability says you do excess damage to an enemy, draw a card. Very critically, there is no limit to that ability.
There's no limit.
You can do that ability as many times as you want to, and it's ridiculous.
That is a crazy ability.
It's probably top 3 hero abilities behind maybe only Doctor Strange. It's so good.
It's insane.
Because I remember the first time I realized how good this ability was the first Con of the Heroes 2022. And that was right after Nova came out.
Mm-hmm.
And we had just gotten Hone Technique from
Crucial.
Nova. Crucial card. That was the key to this perfect build. And Hone Technique came out, and I was looking at those cards, and I think like most of us did, we looked at Dive Bomb and thought, hey, that's a really good combination.
Mm-hmm.
Because Dive Bomb, just for reference, is a 4-cost aggression event card that does 7 damage to one enemy and 1 damage to every other enemy. But you have to have the aerial trait to use it.
Which
and
Rocket
Hone
does.
Technique increases the damage of all aggression events by their cost, which means that if you spend a mental resource on it, it means if you spend a mental resource on Dive Bomb, it does 11 damage and 5 damage to every other enemy, which means it clears the board. And Rocket has Ingenuity, which lets him generate mental resources, and he has Aerial, and he draws a card every time.
Mm-hmm.
And when you combine all these abilities, you get one of my favorite decks I've ever built, and one of the most powerful aggression decks you can possibly build, which is you basically draw your deck every turn you draw your entire deck, and you kill every minion on the board every single turn.
So this is not overkill damage. It's just if you do excess damage to an enemy, if you go over the top, you will draw a card each time you do that. So Dive Bomb, if there are a bunch of minions out there, which there could be because you can play things like Angela or Looking for Trouble to find
Ultron.
minions. So you put those things out there, and then if minions have 3 to 4 health, 5 is going to kill all of them, and you will do excess damage to every single one and draw a bunch of cards. There's also a bunch of other cards that play in this archetype, and LazyTitan will put the deck in the show notes, but cards like Bring It allow you to collect minions and then draw a bunch of cards. Crucially, No Quarter is my next one. Yeah, that came out with Nova as well. No Quarter is a 2-cost event, and you deal 4 damage to an enemy, and when each point of excess damage, you look at a card, and you can draw it if it is a red aggression card.
Discard the top card of your deck for each excess point of damage, and every aggression card gets added to your hand. With Hone Technique, it does 7 damage instead of 5, and becomes you're drawing 5 cards every time, plus the card off dealing excess damage. Mm-hmm. I'll post the deck that I used at the con. That's when I built this deck. I put it on Marvel CDB, and it dominated. It's
so
very good. It's one of my favorite decks to build. If you've never played a really powerful deck in Marvel Champions, it changes your life playing Rocket in aggression. It's incredible. I love it so much.
I think this is one of the strongest decks in the game, like in terms of peak power.
It's crazy.
Now, he does still often need something to defend for him.
Yes.
And the deck you play doesn't use allies because you don't like allies, and they clog up the
Angela.
deck. Angela is the only one, maybe. But when you have that much peak power, you don't often need it. Like, often things die before it matters. But you can have someone playing with you in a multiplayer game who can just work on defending. I've done that multiple times when we played this in 2-player. I use Groot, or I use Cap, or I use someone, and I just protect you, so you don't have to worry about any of those attacks, and all you do is a bunch of damage.
And damage I do. It's quite the deck.
It's just crazy with, his ability to draw cards, plus No Quarter draws you cards, plus you can put in Plan of Attack, Bring It. All these cards are just drawing you more cards, and you just draw through half of your deck on every single turn. It's crazy. Peak Rocket is something really wild, and I think Peak Rocket for me gets to one of the strongest decks in the game.
Yeah, it's up there with Spider-Ham, Web Warriors, and Doctor Strange Ally Swarm. It's it's
Yeah.
it's an insane deck to play.
I agree.
And one thing, the downside I will say to it, if you play with other people, it is a little bit like playing solitaire. Your turns take forever, and you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So just I don't play it often because it can get kind of obnoxious if you play it too much. If you play with someone who would like to take their turn ever, it can be a little annoying. So just be
And
careful.
I don't think this is a solo deck. I'll say I don't think this would be very good
you'd
in
probably
solo.
die.
You'd probably die very quickly. It's not the kind of deck like you can build with Wolverine to rush the villain down.
Mm-hmm.
This does rely on a little bit of setup. You have to find hone technique.
And
You have to
find
get
the
some
rocket
of his
boots.
upgrades. Yeah, his rocket boots to get aerial, and then you have to
And
collect some
ingenuity.
minions. So there are some weaknesses. I think in a minion-free scenario, you might struggle a little bit because
Yeah.
it's built around killing minions.
But as soon as you get like one minion, you're kind of off to the races because you
Yeah.
can get no quarter. You can get if Fusillade is
Yeah.
in the deck because he has pistols that you can use. Like it gets going pretty fast and it doesn't stop once it gets started.
Yeah.
It's
really good.
very much it's crazy. It's awesome.
Coming back to Rocket, one of the things that I will say also about Rocket is he is very versatile. So unlike
Yes.
some heroes that are very strong in a certain build, I think he works in every aspect. I just played a number of games with him in Justice. We were playing through a campaign. I was playing with LazyTitan. We started the X-Men campaign we were playing through, and I played him in Justice. And he's really good.
He's quite good. Yeah.
I've built him with the repurpose archetype. I think makes him not just viable in protection, but really good in protection.
Mm-hmm.
And he's good in leadership. You can put out some allies. You can add tech upgrades to them with Guardians of the Galaxy. Then you can pitch them for drawing cards or whatever, or just for killing people.
He's a very, very good versatile hero.
Kaeko, as someone who's new to the game, have you played Rocket Raccoon?
I have not. So I've just been kind of listening and observing what you guys are talking about. So as far as using Dive Bomb, I think I mentioned before on the podcast I've tried using Dive Bomb, but I can never get those stars to align, getting aerial, getting minions. Is that usually the struggle to run into with Rocket, or is it a little easier depending on the build that you have with his deck? And also is piercing, does that matter?
In my version of the Rocket deck, I use Dive Bomb as kind of the mid-range to end-game finisher. So you just stay down, you play all your upgrades, you try and get your boots as fast as possible, and you try and get hone technique as fast as possible, and you try and get ingenuity as fast as possible. Those 3 cards are what you need. Everything else can kind of go by the wayside. You don't really end up playing a lot of Rocket cards unless you're playing his Schadenfreude card to heal yourself when you play Dive Bomb. Piercing, I wouldn't say matters a ton because of the sheer amount of power you can put out. And he has stuff like his pistols where you can just exhaust it to deal 2 damage to break a tough card, or you can use your 1 basic attack to break a tough card. And playing Dive Bomb, you don't want to only play Dive Bomb. You just play it. If you draw it early and you can't play it, you just don't play it. And then later, once you can play it, you kind of end up cycling Dive Bombs because it does a lot of damage to the villain too. You just deal 11 damage to the villain, do another 11 damage to the villain. And if there's like a big minion like Mystique or something that you need to kill, you can target them with the big shot from Dive Bomb, which does 11 damage. So you can get that overkill, and then it just accidentally does 5 damage to the villain.
Yeah.
So tough cards can block damage, but there's just so much power being thrown around that they don't end up mattering too much. And you have ways to ping them off and stuff. And if you really wanted to, you could put in a card like Piercing Strike. Personally, it's not much of a problem.
Even with the resource cost?
Yeah, the resource, because No Quarter is honestly the best card in the deck because your deck is 99% aggression cards. You have like 1 basic card in there, which is Ingenuity. So if you play No Quarter, you hit a minion for as much excess damage as you can, so probably like 6 if you're getting it perfect. Then you discard the top 6 cards of your deck. You're probably drawing 5 of them, and then you get a whole new hand for 2 cost, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again.
And that's a reason to put out your Rocket upgrades because they thin your deck. It means they won't show up when you're playing No Quarter. It also means you can use them to ping minions with as much as you can so that when you play No Quarter, right, they have 1 health left, and then you're using No Quarter to hit for 7 damage, and then that 7 damage means you're going to draw 6 cards because 6 of it is excess. I don't want to fixate too much on this one deck because I think
this is my personal favorite build of Rocket, and I think I could honestly change it a little bit with some of the new cards like defensive or aggressive energy to put in there to even add more to that.
Warrior skill.
We should acknowledge how good this deck is, but I think we we can also mention that Rocket is very good in every aspect. He's
He is really
one of the
good.
better heroes in the game, and is, I would say, far and away the best Guardian. He's just very versatile, and he also has this insane power spike that you can do when he plays aggression, but he also has a repurpose deck, which is quite powerful.
Repurpose for him is great.
Around.
That's one of the reasons I think his repurpose build is so good, is that you can put these tech upgrades out and then you leave them there until you're ready to play repurpose.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of repurpose heroes, the trick is putting out force field generator or energy barrier and trying to time it so that you use as much of it as you can before it's forcefully discarded, right? When you use the last counter off of force field generator, it'll just go away. So if you don't have repurpose in your hand, you've lost the chance at playing it, and it's a force interrupt, so you have to take those counters. But with Rocket, you can play his big particle cannon, which costs 3, the same benefit as force field generator gives you for repurpose, and then you use all the counters, and it just sits there until you draw repurpose, and then you go crazy. So repurpose is an insane build with him. I might even say it's the best one to build repurpose with.
Oh, yeah.
Can you go over what repurpose is?
Oh, repurpose, yeah.
Repurpose is a zero-cost protection event where you discard a tech upgrade to add its cost in power to one of your stats for the round. So attack, defense, or thwart, and it also readies you.
Yep.
So that adding on to Rocket's thwart, if you say you discard as one of his 3-cost upgrades, you have 6 thwart. You ready yourself again with his thwart card. You're thwarting for 7. You've already thwarted for 13 for 2 cost.
Yeah.
Like
and it's versatile. Like repurpose allows you to pitch that upgrade and add the cost. So you try to shoot for 3 cost upgrades.
As
You
you
add
can.
the cost to one of your basic powers and ready you. So you can do a bunch of damage if that's what you want, or you can do a bunch of thwarting if that's what you want. And with Rocket, you can use CITT, which is a 2-cost upgrade, and you exhaust it and spend 2 resources of any kind to ready yourself.
Ready
So
a Guardian.
Ready a Guardian, true.
Which is
so you repurpose, you add 3 to your thwart. So you thwart for 6, then you spend 2 resources to ready yourself a CITT. You still have the boost from repurpose. You can thwart for 6 again. Repurpose is a really, really good archetype for him, just generally.
And he also has double resource cards, which is he's not one of the few heroes who does. And his double resource cards are kind of the perfect blend of resources because they are mental resources, and it's mental and wild is the 2 resources it gives you, which is very good for the aggression deck. But it also lets you put the topmost tech upgrade on top of your deck, which is crucial for the repurpose deck. So if you lose your rocket launcher or your energy cannon, you can put it back on top. It's called salvage, and it lets you put the card back on top, which lets you play your energy barrier or whatever again, or it lets you spend that mental resource for your cards and get your pistols back. He has this kind of secondary ability of cycling these tech upgrades on top of his insane amount of damage, and I think that means green and red are his best aspects. But he also has a built-in basically 3 thwart, which makes his justice builds really good.
But his also, I should correct you, his resource card is a double resource card that's a mental and a wild, but it doesn't just put the topmost tech from your discard pile on top of your deck. It puts any tech upgrade from your discard pile on top of your deck, so you can be guaranteed to draw it again. In repurpose, you can discard something to add that to your attack or thwart, and then play a double resource card and guarantee you're going to draw back into it on the next time you draw cards. So he's crazy at repurpose. I think he's the best at repurpose.
Yeah,
his minion build is, I think, better than anyone else's minion build.
And it's I think better than any minion build maybe ever will be because he has that unlimited ability.
Rocket is great, and that I think we should talk about because his ability is so strong on his hero side. After you deal excess damage to an enemy, draw a card. It's so good, and it is not limited. So you can do it as many times as you can on a turn.
This is one of the few heroes where the not limiting breaks them. Doctor Strange is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 of us have talked before. Doctor Strange is very good. One of the first ways we think of fixing him is just making it so he can only play 1 spell a turn. That's it. It's
Doctor Strange's invocation deck should 100% be limited to once per round.
And that makes Doctor Strange far and away agreed upon the most overpowered hero. And Rocket falls in the same category. His murdered you ability should probably be twice a round. However, it's not, which means you can play Dive Bomb and draw 6 cards. You can play No Quarter and draw potentially up to 7 cards. It's just so powerful, and the not limiting it makes it just not even the same tier as everyone else.
It should be limited, in my opinion. Maybe once per round you draw 2 cards to kind of mirror his alter ego ability, or twice per round you could draw a card, something. But it should have a limit on it.
It should.
Most other abilities have a limit, right? Quicksilver has a limit to how many times he can ready himself.
Thor
Star-Lord
has a limit.
Thor has a limit. Star-Lord has a limit how many times you can take an encounter card to reduce the cost. Like, all the hero abilities generally have a limit. The fact that this is unlimited makes it crazy. Okay, so we've talked a lot about Rocket. And usually we go through, art, theme, power, fun. We talked about his power a lot. That's kind of the bulk of this. He's just so good and is fun. He's just really, really fun. I love Rocket. I love playing Rocket in any aspect. But in terms of the theme, how do we feel like this hero side fits the theme?
I mean, with 1 attack, 1 defense, 9 health, obviously you kind of feel that that's him at his base form. He's not a tank. He's a raccoon at the end of the day. But the fact that what you guys were discussing, you can get him up to that point of just obliterating the board, getting insane amount of thwart, whatever it may be, and even just his upgrades in his own deck. That's the part that feels like Rocket. And the murdered you, it feels like going off of the MCU, his iconic scream as he just flailing his weapon around, killing everybody on the battlefield. And then after all said and done, everybody's dead. He's just kind of going around picking up whatever tech they're lying around. That also kind of feels like him too. So, yeah, thematically it fits in.
Yeah, I think the theme hits on this one. I think this feels like Rocket. The art of him with his red eyes shooting his giant gun.
Mm-hmm. One of the things in Rocket's cards is all of his guns are about the size of him. Or bigger.
Yeah, all the upgrades that you play out, they're huge. The art is great. I think the art is really good across the board in his hero kit, actually. I quite like it. I quite like this hero side card a lot, too. I think it looks really good.
And you really get the feeling of, because your stats are so low, you really get the feeling of just being a raccoon, but being smart enough to build machines that can destroy any scenario. Mm-hmm. Just being smart enough to build these crazy engines that can destroy all the minions and draw you a bunch of cards. And so you get the feeling of being a genius who can build all these crazy tech while still just being a little guy.
I think we've arrived at final thought time on Rocket. On a scale of 1 to 10, we give them a rating. 5 is true neutral, right in the middle, kind of medium, ambivalence, whatever. I'm just going to go first because I think everybody knows what mine is. I'm going to go ahead and call Rocket a 9 out of 10. He falls short of being a 10 for me. I think he should have a little bit better stats. I think the 2-1-1 is low. I think he should probably start with a native 3 on his thwart at least. I also think I'll take off 1 point for me just because I don't personally like playing the crazy, crazy high power decks. I usually kind of build weird decks right in the middle. And I just think the fact that it's unlimited hinders it a little bit for me because he's almost too good. And you're always tempted to build to that full power ceiling, which is unlimited essentially. But for me, 9 out of 10, I love playing him in every single aspect. And he's one of the few heroes that I do enjoy and regularly play in all of the aspects. He's great. 9 out of 10.
I would say also, I was going to give him a 9 or maybe a 9.5. My reasoning was a little different. I was mostly just going to say that he's extremely fun, very versatile, very powerful. But I was going to dock him the point because he is fragile. With one of his upgrades, he can get up to 12 hit points, and he has a healing card. But if you fight anyone who attacks you twice in a round and you didn't put allies in your deck, like I am prone to do, you just die sometimes.
Yeah.
Or you make one of your friends have to exhaust to defend you, and then that kind of hurts their turn because you were just going to die because you didn't plan right or you got unlucky. That docks him a few points because he is very much a glass cannon. He dies very quickly, and his recovery isn't amazing, so you don't get it back super fast. But the fun and the power of Rocket just kind of throws it all to the side. I'm going to say 9.5 out of 10.
I think this might be the first where I'm a little lower. I'm teetering around a 7 almost. He sounds a lot of fun to play as, but because of the low base stat line, and also just listening to the conversation you two are having, to me it kind of sounds like you got to be as smart as Rocket to make him viable, to build his deck. And as a novice casual gamer, that just seems like something that I'll have trouble achieving, or probably won't have fun achieving. But just in general, seeing his low stat line and then trying to build a deck, not even to the extent of what you guys were discussing, but just in general making him work, I feel like would be a struggle in itself, especially with the 9 health, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
It
again,
is
I haven't
limiting.
played him. I don't know. I'd have to try him out, see how building upgrades on him, making him more viable, seeing how much more fun or not fun that is. But from that novice casual perspective, it sounds like there's a lot of work you have to put into for Rocket. So
I don't remember what his precon is.
I
Do you remember?
think it's aggression. I remember playing it because I remember
Okay.
when we got it, we played Rocket and Groot, and I played Rocket.
Okay. I think it's aggression. I know I've seen on Marvel CDB a lot of decks play him in Justice, and I think if you're playing him solo, that's probably where you need to be.
Solo, Justice is better in solo.
He's probably has enough damage in his kit, and there's enough damage cards in Justice that you can run him viably solo. I mean, Justice is like my least favorite aspect, so I just don't
Yeah,
play
it's
him on
kinda
Justice. But I tried to build a deck with Befuddle in it. Befuddle's a bad card, but that's another day. Overall, our thoughts on Rocket are pretty positive. He's one of the most fun heroes, I think, in the whole game. One of the things I always look for is heroes that offer meaningful decisions as you're playing the game. One of the reasons Doctor Strange, for me, isn't that fun is because there's just not a lot of decisions to make. As long as you can play an invocation, that is your best play. So the best strategy is just to play all the invocations as often as possible, as many times as you can. And I feel like, or Ironheart, another reason I'm not drawn to her is I just feel like upgrading is always your best option, and playing her cards upgrade you. So just get counters and upgrade. That doesn't make them bad. That's just, for me, they're not great. But Rocket, because he has that glass cannon feel of being incredibly powerful, but also not having a lot of health, I really enjoy playing with him because he always offers a good decision. You know, you have to decide, do I want to defend? Do I have to play an ally to keep myself alive? Can I do this or can I do that?
As far as Rocket's glass cannonness goes, you could probably fix a lot of that by just playing probably 5 allies in your deck. If you've listened to the show, we've mentioned multiple times, I don't end up playing allies basically ever, so that is more of a problem for maybe more of a skill issue, possibly my fault. You could just fix it by playing any allies, and you probably wouldn't die as much. But I prefer to go with the Gentleman's Defense, which is, of course, more damage.
I consistently put like Martinex in him and Groot. Martinex is a 3-cost ally with 4 hit points, and he's 1 less if you're a Guardian.
He's a
A
1/1.
solid, cheap one to put out there just for defense. I don't ever use his activations really. And same with Groot. He's a 3-cost ally. He has 6 hit points, and when you defend with him, he heals. After he defends, he heals 2 damage. So he can help keep you alive. So those are the 2 allies I put in there pretty consistently, and then maybe more depending on the aspect.
Mm-hmm.
how much of a hassle would it be to kind of line him up with the synergy with other allies? Because we mentioned earlier how Guardians don't really speak to each other.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that too because I play Nebula, and recently I felt like I had to take out all her Guardian allies that I put in there because they just never spoke to each other.
They just didn't really work.
Would that kind of also run with Rocket, just not really being able to bounce off each other? Or at that point, would you just use regular allies? Or
I
any
think that
other
is a
allies, I
weakness
should
for
say?
him, to be honest. I think that's a weakness for the Guardians overall. I just feel like there aren't enough cards that synergize with other Guardians. So you're not really incentivized to play Guardians for any reason.
Yep.
Other than if you're playing Nowhere, you can draw a card when you put them into play. But that's not, I don't know, that's not a great strategy either because there's not that many Guardians. I end up just putting in cheap allies because I want them to just keep him alive. That's often my strategy with Rocket. He can do everything himself. He has the damage, he has the thwart, but he just needs defense. So that's how I usually use them in his kit. I round them out just for defense or chumping. You know, if you're in an aspect, if you're in, for example, leadership, you're better off playing Maria Hill, right, than you are playing Gamora, even though Gamora will draw you a card when she activates. So I think that is a weakness, and I hope that more Guardian stuff comes out. You know, circle back to the top of our discussion. I hope more Guardian stuff comes out. I hope more supports are released. I hope more allies are released. I hope more events and upgrades are released to kind of synergize, to give you, you know, just to give you some reason to play more Guardians thematically.
And I will say, to your point too, Kaeko, is it's often best to just play cheap allies with Rocket. Like if you're playing him, you want to just play the cheapest allies you can. Ironheart, Maria Hill. I think you can make it work. If you put Gamora works because she gets your events, at least in my my preferred Rocket deck. She gets you events. If you're playing the repurpose deck, she can find you repurpose. She's probably one of the better guardians for him. And I have a personal theory that the Groot ally was designed with Rocket the hero in mind. I have no proof for that, but that's a personal theory of mine. So I think he also works in there. Obviously, as far as the game goes, we talk a lot about what you can play and stuff and what you should play and stuff. Just do whatever you want. Rocket's, especially Rocket, he's good enough that you'll probably be fine building whatever you want to. But we are mostly coming from the perspective of trying to build fun, cohesive, very synergistic decks. But you can just put in Star-Lord if you want to. It's not gonna kill you.
I'll put in Symbiote Suit.
That would definitely help.
You too, and your
It
Symbiote
absolutely
suit.
would. I don't ever put it in there, but it absolutely would help. +1 hand size, and then you have 19 hit points. You have more hit points than Drax. You can't die.
At some point, we're going to talk about Symbiote Suit in this podcast, and there's going to be a difference of opinion.
There's going to be
there will be a difference of opinion.
double
Who knows?
episode. We're going to do Hulk, the hero, and Symbiote Suit. It's going to be the same episode. Stay
The
tuned.
Hulk episode's going to be 5 minutes long. We're going to say he's bad and then move on.
But hey, he gets 5 minutes.
Yeah,
That's 5 minutes of fame, right?
Well, that is going to kind of bring us to the end of the podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to everybody again who's been subscribing and downloading and listening to the show and sharing it. We've gotten some emails, so feel free to write us if you have things to share about the podcast or things you want to talk about. winninghandpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Instagram, Winning Hand Podcast. We just post kind of for the show each episode. We don't really interact a whole lot on Instagram, but feel free to follow us and like us.
If you want to know for sure when we post an episode, that's where you do it.
And
Yeah.
it's also if you need the card as a reference, that's where we post it on Instagram is the card that we're talking about per episode.
Yeah, that's a good point. We do post a picture of each card so you can see what we're talking about for the episode. And then, we're available everywhere you get your podcasts, whatever you're currently listening to us on, but also Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, whatever, Overcast, Pocket Cast, whatever you get your podcasts. I'm sure we are listed. If you use a podcast platform that we are not listed on, that did come up recently, feel free to get in touch. We were, for some reason, not on Pocket Casts, which is a podcasting platform that I had never heard of, but somebody got in touch and said, hey, I use Pocket Casts. Can you guys list on there? And we figured it out, and so we're now on Pocket Casts.
Nice.
Anyway, so we are available anywhere you want to listen to us, basically. We're also on YouTube. Our name is Winning Hand, so if you prefer watching us there, feel free. Last thing before we go, before we say goodbye, we are going to tease the next episode. Episode 9. I'm not going to tell you what the card is, but it is an aggression card. So the aggression players out there, I think, will enjoy this. I will suffer through a conversation about a red card.
You know
it's
the real way.
Beating faces into a bloody pulp. What's not fun about that?
It's the gentleman's aspect. Gentleman's thwart and gentleman's defense. More damage.
As LazyTitan calls attacking, the gentleman's thwart. Because why thwart when you can just attack?
Why thwart when you could kill him faster? That's what I want y'all to remember of me.
So
The
you can take
gentleman's
that away
thwart.
today. That does it for us. This episode 8. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
I love
See
you.
ya.